Welcome to Meet the Eatmons Endangered Species podcast, where we strive to inspire, uplift, and spotlight leaders and individuals, families, people that are kind of standing out in today's world. And we're excited to be here.
Yes, we are.
So we are your hosts, Curtis and Spring Eatman. And today we're going to have a really great show, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I think today we're going to be talking about probably the most, I would say, popular topic when it comes to relationships by far.
Yes.
Not even close. And so it's called love languages. Maybe you know about them as well, right? And so a call to action for you guys, if you believe in the content that we're talking about and you have some people in mind, please share this information. Don't keep it to yourself because we want to impact more if we can. So with today's discussion, since we are talking about love languages, it's kind of just talk about what are those 5 love languages so we're all on the same page, right?
Okay.
So you have like words of affirmation, you have acts of service, you have receiving gifts, right? You have quality of time, and you have physical touch,
Right.
right? And so this segment, what I really want to talk about with you is like the importance of love languages.
Right.
And my question would be is like, why is this topic of love languages even talked about so much?
Yeah. I think that love. So first of all, if you haven't read the book, The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman, definitely go ahead and take a look at that because it really goes into depth of each love language and what they mean and how you can meet those needs for your partner versus yourself, and really helps you to understand a lot about yourself. But I think that this is a very, very important topic in relationships.
Okay.
Because it's basic, it's the foundation of how you receive love, right? And so it's like if I'm speaking Chinese and you're speaking English,
Right.
we can both be speaking at each other, but although I am conveying everything that I need to tell you, if you can't understand the language that I'm speaking to you in, then it's all for naught. Right. And the same thing. So if I can't speak English and you can't speak Chinese, then we both walk away from that conversation feeling really frustrated. And so we want to be able to bridge the gap, learn each other's language, maybe even create our own and put ourselves in a different lane so that we're able to communicate well and feel like we hear each other. So we're not just talking at each other, but we're communicating with each other.
So do you think that when a relationship's starting to, really go into the dating phase and you're just starting to kick up, getting to know each other, trying to understand if we can even speak those love languages together the right way, that the love language that you started off with can also change as you guys get more in depth of your relationship?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think when we were early stages of our relationships, I mean, I'm still words of affirmation, but that was like a number one. It was like a heavy hitter for me because I needed you to reaffirm how you felt about me. I wanted to continuously understand, like, okay, does he love me more? Do I love him more? Are we in a place where, like, it was still that battle of like, am I secure in this relationship? So I constantly needed to hear it over and over and over again. And that was a very important thing for me. Whereas today, I know that you love me. And of course, words of affirmation are great, but I don't need you to say it 100 times a day for me to know that it's true. Today, now I need a little bit more quality time, right? Because our life is crazy. We have things going on. And so quality time is something that's a lot more important to me because it's the time that we spend together. It's a lot more precious. So I think as you evolve, you become a different person. We're growing with each other and growing together. And so the people that we were when we got married are not the people we are today. We're certainly not the people we were when we started dating. Right. And
Right.
so your love language also evolves. There may be some things that are foundational that don't change. But there's also things that become more dominant for you. So what are your thoughts on this topic?
No, I would agree tremendously on what you're saying because I remember when we first started, physical touch was big for me. Acts of service was big for me. Not so much receiving gifts or quality time, but you're such a gift giver that I start liking to receive gifts. And you're so big on quality time, even though I'm an introvert and I'm okay with being by myself. Since you always want quality time, I had to start, I guess you would say, enjoying that being quality time was going to increase on that on my list. So it
Right.
used to be like a 5. Now it's like a, maybe a 2 or 3 for me now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I think, as a relationship, I guess you would say evolves,
Mm-hmm.
right? What was important to me and what was important to you now becomes one,
Right.
right? So we basically create our own language of love.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically, right?
Yeah. So it's like I have my personal gifts. You have your or gifts. I have my personal love languages. You have your personal love
Yes.
languages. And now we've created this oneness, which
Yeah.
is what is
Marriage
supposed to
anyways. Yeah.
happen in
Yeah.
marriage, right? We're supposed to be two becoming one.
Right.
And so now that we're evolving into one, we kind of have taken a little bit of each other's love language. And now, because for me, physical touch was not super high on the board for
Right.
me. And now it is something that's extremely important to me. I always want to cuddle and I always want to spend time. I mean, I've always been like, oh, hold my hand or, but now I feel like it is a little bit higher on the list for me as well today. So
Wow.
that's
Okay.
really cool.
Well, I love that. Well, do you have a question? Another question you want to go in that segment in regards to the importance of love language before we go to the next one?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that it's really important to understand each other's love languages pretty early on.
Okay.
I think reading this book and having this is like human nature stuff. And the more that you understand human nature, the more you understand people and how they work, because most people only study themselves,
That's funny.
right? They only know how they work and they think everyone should work the way that they do. And so,
You don't see the world like I see it.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So, like, I think that it's so important that if you are cognizant of other people's love languages and the way that they move, then you'll see why certain things are more important to people. Like, for example, when we first started dating, you would, go and grab lunch or whatever, and you would come home and you'd just be eating and I would be crushed. And you were like, "What is your problem?" And I'm like, "You didn't bring me food." And you're like, "You can have some of mine. You didn't say anything. You didn't ask. I didn't know if you were hungry." And I'm like, "But you didn't think to get me food?" Like, it hurt me. And for you, you just did not understand. You were like, "What is the problem?" And but gifts and acts of service were big for me. They were super high on the board. So I was just like, "Whoa, like who is this person?" Right? And so
Yeah.
for you, that, like, if I would just go grab something, you wouldn't have even thought twice about it. Right? And so if that as an example of early in relationships, I think that's where people are like, "Oh no, he did something I'm cutting him off. I'm done because he
Yeah.
should have known." Right? And there's certain things that we just have to remember, that our love languages are also rooted in our perspective and things that maybe we had lack of or abundance of
Mm.
as we were growing up, as we were children, and things that kind of starts to create. Because if you think about it, for men, their first love is their mother.
Yeah.
For women, their first love is their father.
Yes.
Right? And
Hopefully. Yeah.
so we start to create our ideals of love and our needs in relationship based off of those first, like, early foundational relationships, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important to understand people's background and say, "Oh, how did you grow up? What was important to you growing up?" And you can kind of start to listen to their language to
Yeah.
hear, "Oh, this might be kind of important to you. Oh, you might be more of an acts of service person. You might
Right.
be a gifts type of person." And I think that would help people so much in navigating relationships.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because for me, as being the oldest in my, family when I was growing up and looking at you and you're the youngest, right? So the way that we were loved as, siblings or in our household growing up had a lot to do with how we basically created the love languages we have today.
Yeah.
So interesting. You said like when you're asking early on about dating and things like that, like okay, like how were you loved? Like tell me about your parents. Like what did they do with you? How like where are you on the spectrum of siblings? Do you have younger siblings or older siblings? Because older acts completely different love in regards to younger.
Yes.
It's a completely different love,
That's
right?
so true.
So that has a lot to do again on how you're going to act in the relationship too.
Yeah.
So
It really does.
I think that's interesting enough. When we start talking about that. Another thing I really want to start breaking down is because everyone always talks about love languages, like in regards to like how do I receive it for myself or how do I receive it for you, and it's good to know each other's love language as you just mentioned already. But like, what is the problems you see in love languages today? Like,
Well, I think sometimes people tend to assume that they know the other person's love language. And so sometimes we have to not just assume, like you might think that you can understand and recognize it through conversation,
okay,
but I think it is important to have the actual conversation at some point and ask,
mm,
what are your love languages?
that's
What are the
important.
things, and acknowledge them in an important way, and show the other person that it's important to you to know what their love language is. So, for example, when I know we had a conversation at one point when, I would be like, hey, it feels like you just will go and grab stuff and you're not even thinking about me in your day. Like it doesn't have to be like some big elaborate gift, but just let me know you're thinking of me throughout the day,
Mm,
and then you started to do little things like, every now and then I'll get a card and it'll just, say how much you love me in it, or, I'll have a flower, or you'll bring me some roses, or just little things, a pack of gum, my favorite candy, just something small. And that really started to show me like, wow, he's really listening. And that's not something that's innate for him. So for him to walk outside of his natural mindset of how he shows love because he knows that's what's important to me, that was a big deal for me. And so I think that's really important, is to ask and to talk about it. Talk about what your love languages are. So for you, what do you think are some things that could be small adjustments that can create big impact in relationships when it comes to love languages?
small adjustments that can make big. First and foremost, writing down
Mm-hmm.
or keep it in front of you what your partner's love languages is,
Mm-hmm.
because like for example,
Mm-hmm.
I asked you what is your love language, and then you also told me that you really care about gifts a lot
Yeah.
and the acts of service a lot, and you kept saying, I was like, okay, so this is very important to her, let me write this down, because like you mentioned, innately it wasn't a big thing for me. So I wrote it down and I said, okay, how can I systemize this to teach myself how to give her the love that she needs?
Mm.
Like, so that's what I had to do. So I was like, okay, so what if I just like, I don't know, twice a month, give her a gift?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe three times, maybe once a week, give her a gift. And I
Right.
would systemize it, and then it became at first I had to like really overdo it because it was something I wasn't used to doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was every day.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, how can I give Spring the love that she needs to fill her cup?
Mm-hmm.
All right. And cause we all looking for our love cup in essence to be filled up. Right. So how
Right.
can I fill her cup of love where she feels that? So I said, okay, let me look. Does she like cards? I think she likes cards. Every time I give her cards, she loves it. Right. She loves roses. What woman doesn't love roses? I know she loves paydays. I love, candy. Like you got the
You
old
do
grand.
always do that. You come home
Yeah.
from the grocery store, you bring me payday. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh.
Your little old grandma candy. It's
I do love old
almond
candy.
joy, whatever it is. You like a candle. Like I know, like there's certain things on your list that are just ongoing, just reoccurring gifts.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's some of the big ones, like like the ones you got on your fingers, right?
Yeah.
And then there's like trips might be a gift, or there's just spontaneous things I'll start doing just for fun because those are things I know that you enjoy. So, and then I had, because I really believe that, I think Music Soul Child said it the best, like, teach me how to love. Like,
Yeah.
I think our partners will teach us if we just listen. And then in marriage, my job is not to always worry about if you're filling up my cup. My job only is to really to fill up your cup.
Yeah.
And because I'm supposed to be living for you.
Right.
And so if I'm only worrying about if my cup is filled all day, all right, then how can I fill up your cup if I'm only worried about my cup?
Right.
I can't look at both cups at the same time. So I think that's the issue and the problem I see when it comes to, love languages is a lot of people are only looking at, dang, you didn't give me no physical touch today. This is why I can't give you a gift.
Ooh,
Uh,
that's super good. Because what happens when you feel like you're giving, but the other person is not reciprocating?
ooh, just takers, huh?
Yeah,
Just
you start
consumers,
to
huh?
feel like you're like they're just taking.
Oh, that's an issue, right? And then, so that goes back to your covenant.
But do you stop
No,
giving?
no, you have to. I know. So that's the mind tricks you got to play now, all right? And so the mind trick I play is that I'm competing with you. Like, I'm going to outgive you. I'm going to beat you. Like, I am going
No,
to.
you're not.
Yes, I
You're
am.
never.
My
No, you're
your cup
not.
is a lot fuller than mine is.
No, you're
Promise you.
not.
It
No,
has to
you're
be.
not.
Has to be. Because
No.
that's the covenant I got with God. See, that's why I have to beat you. I have to
You
lead
got
this.
diamonds too.
Yeah, like that's so funny. So my job is to beat you at the end of the day. All right. So if I stay focused on outgiving you with your love, and you are now competing in that too, and hopefully I inspire you to do the same thing, and you inspire me. Just because sometimes in the human nature, I'm going to switch back to looking at minds like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I'm kind of empty in this area. I kind of empty in this area, but then I have to re-switch myself and say, dang, it's not about me. It's about her. If I just focus on her, what I give, I shall receive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's so important and big because so many people, they're looking and they're constantly evaluating how often their love language is being touched. And it's almost like when you go to the restaurant and you look at the server, you start with $5. Up, you didn't bring my refill, you're down to 4. You forgot my Parmesan cheese, you're
She's
down
kidding,
to
by
3.
the way. I hope
Right? No,
Yeah,
but everybody
yeah.
can relate to that. Like
Yeah, it's
we've
for
all
us.
had those family members or been that or done
Yeah.
that, right? And so I think that it's kind of like that,
Yeah.
where people are like that with their love language. Like, oh, you didn't give me, you didn't do mine. Okay, well, now I'm taking away. Well, now I'm not going to give so much to you.
Yeah.
And so, but the thing is that was such a good thing you said that you want to be inspiring your partner to start acting on your love language and just communicate more. If you feel
Right.
like it's not, and if you're not getting touched on, have the conversation and say, hey, not, hey, I did this for you. You should be doing this for me.
Yeah.
Because if it's a tick for tat, then your heart is in the wrong place anyway.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
you have to really think about that. But you also have to be flexible in that learning curve. You have to be willing to allow people to to get there, to learn the language. Like when you're learning a new language, you don't learn that new language the next day,
That's
not
so
even the next
true.
month. Right? It
So
takes
true.
time to fully, you might learn some of the words, but to be fluent
Yes.
in another language, that could take years. Right? And so the fact that this is called love languages, I think is such a tip of a hat to that process.
Yeah.
That this is not that's something that's going to be so quick, and people feel like, well, I told you once or twice.
Right.
It's like, yeah, well, you might have studied a phrase a couple of times, but if you don't use it often because it's not your natural language,
Right.
then you lose those words.
That's so true.
Right. And so you have to constantly be having those conversations and working in that language for you to be fluent and stay fluent. Because that's the thing that's interesting too, is that if you learn a language, you could be fluent in that language.
Ooh.
But if you don't use it,
You lose it.
you lose
Oh,
it.
girl, you better talk.
And that's
a
the
message.
same thing. It's the same thing with your
Yeah.
partner's love language. If you may be good at speaking their language for a period of time, but if you take your eye off of that and you stop speaking that language, you might forget how to flow in that area and start leaving deficits for your partner.
Wow, that's big because, I want to piggyback on something you said, which is it could take years to become fluent if you're not immersed in the language itself, right? So, like, what is the timing? When is enough time to hold your partner accountable for something that they should have learned already, that you believe they should have learned?
So this is where I think it's kind of interesting because in this area, I don't know if this is a space where you hold each other accountable.
Okay.
I think this is an area that your hearts appeal to each other.
Interesting.
So when I hear hold you accountable, to me that feels like there's a punishment involved. There's a gift and a punishment. And when we're talking about like there's a reprimand, that comes with holding you accountable.
Or saying holding to the commitment of my love language, learning
Right.
my love language.
Right.
If that-
Okay. So I see what you're saying here, but I think that it's an appeal. I think it's an appeal. When you're appealing, when you're coming you're offering your heart, right? You're putting everything on the table, and you're allowing the other person to make the decision, right? Like if you think of a court's appeal, right? It's like you're not going in there saying you have to take what I'm saying and do something with it.
Right.
They may have a decision was already made. That's why there's an appeal happening.
True.
Right? And so then when you come to make the appeal, you're giving everything that you have to illustrate the importance of that person to see the other side and then it's up to them to make the decision on if they're going to take your side or not. And so I think that when you're coming into that place with your partner, it's an appeal of like, hey, this is my heart, this is what's important to me, and I would really love for this to be important to you as well, and it would mean this to me, rather than it feeling like hey, you haven't done this and it's been this many times and I've talked to you about it this many times, and like it's frustrating me that you're not getting on my level, right? That's where the change is. And I feel like that's where inspiration has to happen when it comes to love languages, because I think we win so many more bees with honey, right?
Interesting topic, because let's say you gave the answer if the partner is willing to tell you how they feel. What happens if they are just mentally taking and saying, well, my feelings are being hurt because, it's been years. I've already communicated how I feel.
Right.
This is my love language. We talk about it consistently, and you're still not doing it to my standard. But they don't say nothing, but they feel it though.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, that's what I'm saying. When you're reading each other's love languages and you're able to speak each other's language, your partner doesn't have to say anything. You can see it in the way that they move that something's off. Right? If you're really, really seeking to understand each other's language. Like, there's times where you'll come in the house and you don't have to say a word, and I can go down the list in my head of things like, okay, there's something going on here. He needs this, check, up. This is what he needs. Oh, there's a few things that can kind of get you into a place of being off center, right? And I'm like, okay, check up. It's this. He needs to eat. He needs some rest. He needs some time to himself. Certain things like that. And so I think sometimes it's just about that survey that you're doing with each other, and that sometimes like nobody wants to have to say it. Like, I don't want to have to say
That
if
part.
if I'm somebody who's words of affirmation. I don't want to have to say to you, hey, can you tell me I'm pretty?
Yeah.
Hey, can you tell me you love me? Then it defeats the purpose, and I don't want the pity version of that.
No one likes pity anything.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? So from your perspective, what do you think?
No, I think that's where relationships can sever. Is that a partner feels like we've communicated this, we talked about this, but you're not like, you may try, but you're not reaching my standard of it. Like, what's the gap? Like, how do you help your partner in the process get to the standard that you're looking for to because at the end of the day, this is why I believe people get divorced.
Yeah.
Is that they're not getting the love that they feel that they need to the
Right.
standard that they need it, right? And like, so how, like, this, the whole point of this podcast is to inspire people to what? To be strong again, and and to remove that, if they're getting married and going that route, to not have to go to that ever D word, so for us, I think, well, for me in this example is like, how do you close that gap? Like, how do you stop someone from being in a position where they're thinking so much about, man, like, they're not doing what I need them to do.
Yeah.
Versus, but they don't want to communicate it because they don't want the pity.
Right.
And so, like, if I say, for example, let's just say like, oh my gosh, you're not giving me any acts of service to the standard I need. I mean, you do it once a quarter, but I need it once a week.
Right.
But I've communicated that many times, but I don't want to say it. And I know I'm doing yours. Right? Or at least I'm doing it to the standard I think I'm doing it to, right?
Right.
But so, like, how could you help, someone that's maybe listening to this on that end, where they're just not being loved the way they feel they need to be loved?
Yeah. I think that in these situations, you do have to communicate in some, at some point. Yeah, you don't want to have to keep saying it over and over and over again, but that's where I think that the check-ins are really
I
important.
like check-ins.
Having regular check-ins with each other, because if we haven't checked in and talked about this and something's been festering and bothering you for months and months and months and months, then now that's not just on them, that's on you, because you're not giving them the space and the opportunity to know that something's wrong for them to try to adjust it or fix it, right? So I think
That's
that
true.
having regular check-ins is very important for you to say, hey, this is what I need. Oh my gosh, I'm really excited. You did this well. Thank you so much. I could see that you did that. It meant so much to me.
Mm.
And I think that when your spouse or your significant other starts to tap on the area that you want them to work in, you have to even almost overreact.
You do.
Like, you have to be like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. That meant the world to me. Oh my God. Like,
That's
make
funny.
it very apparent that, like, hey, this is the behavior that is important to me. And this, like, I'm showing you that I see that you did it.
Rewarding behavior.
Exactly, rewarding that behavior. But I think that there's also a way to apply these love languages even beyond romance.
Yeah.
We apply this really more often in relationships.
Okay.
And it's something that I think we kind of almost know now. Like, hey, what are your love languages? Let's figure
Right.
that out.
Right.
But also, what about family relationships, friendship relationships, business relationships?
Yeah.
People still need to feel seen, heard, and understood.
I agree.
And knowing the love language of your community is also really important, and it also will help you in understanding how to meet their needs and how to make them feel seen as well.
It's big.
So as far as, like, that growth curve, for you, what would you say? Just give a couple of tips to people who might be on that growth curve of learning their spouse or their community's love language, and what can they do to kind of close those gaps?
I think, when you're on the growth curve, it's really studying. It's almost like going back to school,
Right.
right? And you're really studying your partner, and you're really seeing again the good, bad, and ugly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then, like, I like what you said about check-ins. I know thing for us that's been very, very helpful is, we do a lunch every Monday,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we have a date night on, every Wednesday or Thursday, right? And then we have a family date night, and then we have, we open up for friends or family on the weekend. Like, so we have so many different opportunities to learn,
Right.
so, but also in that learning, we get a review. So I'm processing the learning and my activity, but I always like to do the check and saying, so how are we doing? Tell me the good, the bad, and the ugly. How can I improve? What's my gap? So I can get better next week. Because if we're not getting better on a weekly basis, then we're not growing.
Right.
And my job is ultimately to progress.
Right.
Right. So I think in the learning curve is really just having a lot of systematic check-ins, right? And then making sure that it's intentional to see where your gaps are,
Right.
so that you can
Right.
fix them. Because unfortunately, you might have that conversation, but you don't put a plan together to fix it,
Right.
right? It just became conflict. It just became an
Mm-hmm.
argument, but you never really, said, you know what, this is my plan of progress.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what I would do.
I think that's so good. And just one last thing, as I was listening to you talk, what came to mind was also the love languages of your children.
That's big.
Because we think so much about the love languages of our relationships and the adults in our life, but sometimes we forget to take inventory of the love languages of our children. And I read somewhere that the children that are most like us receive the most love.
Yes.
And the kids that are different than us, that we don't really understand that language that they have,
Okay.
sometimes that kid is the one that grows up feeling left out or feeling unloved or feeling, like gaps. And so I think those are the most important ones to press into. To when you feel like there's a challenge to learn that language, really challenge yourself to learn it, because that's where where it's needed most. Because the kids and the people who have a similar language to you, they
That's
feel
easy.
it already.
Yeah,
Because
that's
that's
easy.
the way that you do it.
You're on
That's
the
the
same
way that you
vibration,
flow.
yeah.
Right? So it's your growth opportunity to leave where you are and flow into other lanes of love to the people around you, and to make those impacts for your community.
That's
So
good.
I think this week a great challenge would be to just lead with like love, respect, and challenge yourself to see, like notice people around you who have different love languages than you,
Mm.
that are maybe a little different than you are, and really notice them and press into them this week and allow them to feel your love this week. I think that would be a really
I
great,
like that challenge.
yeah, great challenge.
Okay. So because, also my question would also be for you is like, for those who are listening, like how does self-reflection really matter when it comes to love languages?
It's so important. Self reflection is so important because you, like you said earlier, you teach people how to love you. And if you don't know how to love you, then you don't know what to teach.
Yeah, that's so true.
And
Yeah.
and you have to be in tune with your current self. And so self-reflection is really important, because if you're not in tune with your current self, then you might be running off of the residue of an old version of yourself
Oh,
that doesn't serve you anymore. And I think also self-reflection is self-reflecting in how you show up outside of self,
okay.
right? Because you need to reflect on how you're showing love, not just how you're receiving it, and how you're teaching people how to love. And I think that's probably the most impactful place that self-reflection is important, is to reflect on how am I showing up in other people's story. Am I the villain in other people's lives, in other
Right.
people's story?
Right.
Am I the heroine? Am I the, the love interest? Who am I in other people's story? And how do I feel about that version of myself, right? I think that's really important. So
Good point.
yeah, very much. So this was a good talk today. I think this was a
Yes.
really important topic, that we really need to make sure that we're covering and we talk about, because at the end of the day, God is love.
Yes, it agape. Yeah.
Yes, and He is the ultimate love, and so He teaches us. Like we talk about, like we teach people how to love.
Right.
Like He teaches love to us, and so
Right.
are we showing it to the people around us, and are they feeling that? That's something that's super important.
Unconditionally,
So
right?
absolutely,
Man, so we talked a lot
yeah.
today. We talked about like how love languages impact, relationships, and how it can really spark really discussions like this, on a capability basis, compatibility basis, I guess you would say, or self-awareness basis, or even like emotional intelligence, because that's really what this is.
Yeah.
It's like, are we even aware of what's going on? I think
Yeah.
that's like the number one thing for leaders is understand awareness. And when it comes to understanding languages like this, especially for your partner or your business partner or your children or just a relationship alone, it's understanding again awareness of where they're at and what they need so they can get their love filled in their cup. So,
Absolutely.
yes.
Well, I'll say this, as we wrap up today's episode, just remember, with our our constant changing world, and, as these strong families and strong individuals are rising up, as we're becoming examples and leading more and more of these people who are rising up as endangered species. I just want to say that your survival is not just important, but it's vital. And
Yes.
so we're excited for you to continue to take this journey with us. We're committed, to standing up for something, for speaking about the things that are important to us, for having integrity, and to help nurture that rare and powerful, impactful parts of you that we encourage you to let shine as you show the world your endangered species. So
Yes.
thanks for joining us today, and we will see you next week.